Rachel Carter pushed through the glass doors of Atlanta Combat Center, her weathered gym bag slung over one shoulder. At 38, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to prove. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her faded army t-shirt was mostly hidden beneath a loose windbreaker. To anyone watching, she looked like just another fitness enthusiast trying something new. The gym buzzed with afternoon energy, heavy bags swayed under powerful strikes, and the rhythmic thud of gloves against leather created a steady soundtrack. Rachel had been coming here for 3 weeks now, drawn by the facility's reputation for quality instruction and diverse training programs. What she hadn't expected was the underlying current of intimidation that seemed to flow through certain corners of the space. Derek Walsh dominated the main training area like a king holding court. At 220 pounds of solid muscle, the 26-year-old MMA fighter commanded attention wherever he moved. His 15 wins and 2 losses in regional competitions had earned him a following, both in person and online. More importantly, his uncle Frank owned the gym, giving Derek unofficial authority that he wielded without restraint. Rachel watched from the stretching area as Derek demonstrated a takedown to a group of newer members. His technique was solid, but his commentary was laced with unnecessary aggression and casual put-downs. "That's how real fighters handle business," he announced loudly, making sure his voice carried across the room. None of that gentle sparring nonsense they teach at those cardio kickboxing places. The comment wasn't directed at anyone specific, but Rachel noticed how several women in the vicinity shifted uncomfortably. She had seen this dynamic before. Alpha personalities who needed to establish dominance through exclusion rather than excellence. During her 8 years in the Army Special Forces, she had encountered plenty of men who confused volume with authority, aggression with competence. Those days felt like another lifetime now. Rachel worked as a physical therapist at Peachtree Rehabilitation Center, helping athletes and accident victims regain their strength and mobility. Her colleagues respected her knowledge of body mechanics and her patient, effective approach with clients. What they didn't know was that her understanding came not just from textbooks and training, but from years of intense military preparation where precision could mean the difference between life and death. She had made a conscious choice to leave that world behind to build something quieter and more meaningful. The unit insignia tattooed on her shoulder remained hidden beneath her civilian clothes, a private reminder of who she had been, not a badge to display for validation or intimidation. The decision to try mixed martial arts had come from one of her patients, a college wrestler recovering from a shoulder injury. "With your understanding of body mechanics, you'd probably pick up MMA really quickly," he had suggested during a session. "Might be a good way to challenge yourself in something new." Rachel had laughed it off initially, but the idea took root. After months of watching training videos and practicing basic moves in her living room, she decided it was time to join a proper gym. Atlanta Combat Center offered classes for all skill levels and had solid reviews online. It seemed like the perfect place to test herself in a new discipline while honoring the physical training her late father had instilled in her. James Carter had been a former Army Ranger who passed away 2 years earlier after a brief battle with cancer. He had been Rachel's inspiration throughout her military career, teaching her that true strength came from discipline and precision, not from the need to dominate others. She kept his dog tags in her gym bag, a tangible connection to the man who had shaped her understanding of what it meant to be truly formidable. It wasn't until her third visit to the gym that the warning signs became impossible to ignore. Derek had noticed her quiet focus and rapid improvement, and his reaction wasn't approval. It was suspicion. During a group warm-up session, he had made a point of positioning himself near her, his voice carrying just loud enough for others to hear. "Nice form for a beginner," he said, the words coated with condescension. "But this isn't a fitness class. We train serious fighters here." Rachel had nodded politely and continued with her routine, but she felt the shift in the room's energy. Several members glanced between her and Derek, reading the social dynamic and choosing sides. She recognized the moment for what it was, the first test in what could become a much larger conflict. As she gathered her things that day, Rachel caught her reflection in the gym's mirrors. The woman looking back at her seemed ordinary, unremarkable, but behind those calm eyes was 8 years of elite military training, countless hours of hand-to-hand combat instruction, and the hard-earned wisdom that's sometimes the most dangerous. Opponents are the ones who don't need to advertise their capabilities. Derek Walsh was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The confrontation Rachel had sensed brewing came to a head the following Tuesday morning. She arrived early, hoping to practice some basic combinations on the heavy bags before the gym filled with its usual crowd. The space was mostly empty, just a few dedicated members getting in their workouts before heading to day jobs. Rachel had been working methodically through a series of strikes, focusing on form over power. Her movements were precise and controlled, each punch flowing naturally into the next. She was so absorbed in the rhythm that she didn't notice Derek and his usual group entering the training area until they were directly behind her. "Excuse me?" Derek said, his tone sharp enough to cut through her concentration. "We need this area for some actual training." Rachel paused mid-combination and turned to face him. Derek stood with his arms crossed, flanked by 3 of his regular training partners. Their body language was deliberately intimidating, a wall of muscle and attitude designed to make her feel small and unwelcome. "I'll just be a few more minutes," Rachel replied evenly, gesturing toward the timer she had set. "Then it's all yours." Derek's expression hardened. "I don't think you understand how this works," he said, stepping closer. "This isn't Planet Fitness. We have serious athletes here who need priority access to equipment." One of his friends snickered. "Maybe try the yoga studio next door," he suggested with mock helpfulness. "They probably have classes more suited to your level." Rachel felt a familiar calm settle over her, the same mental state that had served her well during hostile encounters overseas. Her voice remained steady as she responded. "I reserved this time slot through the front desk. I'm happy to share the space, but I'm not leaving early." The statement hung in the air like a challenge. Derek's jaw tightened, and Rachel could see him calculating his next move. In her peripheral vision, she noticed other gym members beginning to take notice of the confrontation, some stopping their own workouts to watch. "Look, lady," Derek said, his voice rising slightly, "I don't know what kind of gym you're used to, but here we have a hierarchy. I've been training here for 3 years. I compete professionally. You've been coming here for what, 2 weeks? 3 weeks, Rachel corrected mildly. Derek's friends laughed, but there was an edge to it now. Rachel's refusal to back down was clearly not what they had expected. 3 weeks, Derek repeated mockingly. "And you think that gives you equal standing with actual fighters?" Rachel picked up her water bottle and towel, making it clear she was preparing to move, but her response was measured, carrying just enough steel to let Derek know she wasn't intimidated. "I think it gives me the right to use facilities I pay for without harassment," she said. "But I'm done here anyway." As she turned to leave, Derek made his fatal mistake. He reached out and grabbed her shoulder, spinning her back around to face him. "We're not finished talking," he said, his grip firm enough to leave no doubt about his intentions. The moment his hand made contact, Rachel's training kicked in. Not the devastating combat techniques that could have ended the confrontation in seconds, but the mental discipline to assess, de-escalate, and respond proportionally. She looked down at his hand, then back up to his face with an expression that made several people in the vicinity take an unconscious step backward. "Remove your hand," she said quietly. Something in her tone, perhaps the complete absence of fear or anger, made Derek hesitate. For a brief moment, uncertainty flickered across his features. Then his pride reasserted itself, and he tightened his grip. "Or what?" he challenged. Rachel didn't respond verbally. Instead, she placed her own hand over his with what appeared to be a gentle touch. Derek's confident smirk lasted exactly 2 seconds before his knees buckled. The pressure point technique she applied was precise and controlled, causing intense discomfort without lasting damage. Derek released her shoulder immediately, shaking his hand to restore circulation. His friends stared in shock, unsure whether to intervene or retreat. "Thank you," Rachel said politely, as if he had simply held a door for her. She gathered her things and walked toward the locker room, leaving Derek and his group standing in stunned silence. The incident spread through the gym's social network like wildfire. By evening, everyone who trained at Atlanta Combat Center had heard some version of the story. Derek's humiliation burned deeper with each retelling, and Rachel found herself marked as a target for more serious retaliation. She had tried to avoid conflict, tried to de-escalate with reason and compromise. But Derek Walsh had forced her hand, and now both of them would have to live with the consequences. The quiet war between them had officially begun. The week following their first confrontation brought a systematic campaign of intimidation that would have broken most people. Derek Walsh wasn't just angry, he was humiliated, and his response was to marshal every resource at his disposal to drive Rachel from the gym. It started subtly. Equipment Rachel had reserved would mysteriously become unavailable when she arrived for her sessions. Training partners assigned to work with her would either go excessively easy, treating her like fragile glass, or unnecessarily rough, testing her limits with barely controlled aggression. During group classes, instructors would skip over her when providing individual feedback, their attention focused on more established members. The locker room became a minefield of whispered conversations that stopped abruptly when Rachel entered. Comments about her age, her build, and her presumed inexperience followed her through the facility. "Soccer mom trying to be tough," she overheard one woman say, "probably going through a midlife crisis." Derek's inner circle elevated the harassment to an art form. They would crowd her during warm-ups, forcing her into smaller spaces. They nicknamed her Grandma, despite her being only 38, and the name spread throughout the gym with viral efficiency. When she signed up for Derek's advanced techniques class, he used her as the demonstration dummy, applying holds with unnecessary force that left bruises on her arms. "Resistance training," he explained to the class with a predatory smile. "Real combat isn't gentle." Rachel endured each session with stoic patience, but the physical evidence of Derek's escalation was impossible to hide. Her colleagues at the rehabilitation center began asking questions about the marks on her arms. She deflected their concerns with vague explanations about intensive training, but Dr. Martinez, the clinic's director, pulled her aside after a particularly visible bruising incident. "Rachel, I need to ask this directly," he said, his expression serious. "Are you safe at home? These injuries have a pattern that concerns me." The conversation was mortifying. Rachel had spent years earning respect through her professional competence, and now her personal life was becoming a source of workplace speculation. She assured Dr. Martinez that she was fine, but the incident underscored how Derek's campaign was bleeding into other areas of her life. The gym's management, influenced by family ties and business considerations, provided no refuge. Frank Walsh, dismissed her complaints with bureaucratic indifference. "Boys will be boys," he said, when Rachel reported the escalating harassment. "If you can't handle a little competition, maybe you should try a less intense environment." The front desk staff began losing her class reservations, forcing her to either leave or join overcrowded sessions where she received minimal instruction. The billing department charged her account twice in 1 month, and when she pointed out the error, the manager suggested that perhaps a more budget-friendly gym would suit her better. But it was the public humiliation that cut deepest. A local sports blogger visited the gym for a feature on Atlanta's growing MMA scene. The resulting article, titled "Fitness Tourists Invading MMA: The Dilution Problem," included a photo of Rachel struggling with a complex move, captured at her most vulnerable moment. The piece never mentioned her by name, but used her image as the face of casual enthusiasts who supposedly threatened the sport's integrity and tradition. The article went viral within regional fighting circles, accumulating hundreds of comments and shares. Worse still, several of Rachel's physical therapy clients saw the piece, leading to awkward questions about her professionalism and commitment to her primary career. Through it all, Rachel maintained her composure. She showed up consistently for classes, continued to improve despite the hostile environment, and refused to give Derek the satisfaction of seeing her break. In private moments, she would touch her father's dog tags and remember his advice from her Special Forces training. "Days. Let them underestimate you," he had told her. "That's when you have the advantage." The only person who showed her any kindness during this period was Melissa, a kickboxing instructor who had witnessed Derek's behavior patterns before. "He does this to every woman who doesn't fit his idea of what belongs here," Melissa explained, during a quiet conversation in the locker room. "Either you're eye candy for him and his buddies, or you're a target. I've seen 3 women quit in the past year because of it." Melissa's warning was well-intentioned, but it only strengthened Rachel's resolve. She had not survived Special Forces selection and multiple combat deployments to be driven away by a small-town bully with an inflated ego. Each humiliation became fuel, each obstacle a chance to demonstrate the mental toughness that had once made her an elite soldier. She wasn't fighting for her country anymore. She was fighting for the right to define her own path without intimidation or judgment. And unlike Derek Walsh, Rachel Carter had been trained to fight wars, not just battles. The escalation was about to reach its breaking point, and when it did, everyone at Atlanta Combat Center would learn the difference between posturing and genuine strength. The moment that would change everything came on a Wednesday evening in late October. Rachel had endured 6 weeks of systematic harassment, her patience tested daily by Derek's escalating campaign of intimidation. She arrived for her regular session to find a handwritten note taped to her locker. "Last warning, find another gym before you get seriously hurt." The threat was unsigned, but the handwriting was familiar. Derek had moved beyond public humiliation and professional sabotage into direct intimidation. Rachel stared at the note for a long moment, feeling something shift inside her. The careful control she had maintained for weeks began to crack, not with anger, but with crystalline clarity about what needed to happen next. She folded the note carefully and placed it in her gym bag, then prepared for what she suspected would be her final regular class at Atlanta Combat Center. Derek was already holding court in the main training area when she emerged from the locker room, surrounded by his usual audience of admirers and enablers. The evening session was advanced grappling, and Derek made sure to partner with Rachel for the demonstration portions. His technique was flawless, but his application was designed to inflict maximum discomfort within the bounds of what could be called training. When he applied a rear chokehold, he held it seconds longer than necessary. During joint lock demonstrations, He pushed her flexibility to its limits. "Resistance builds character," he announced to the class, as Rachel struggled with a particularly uncomfortable position. "In real combat, your opponent won't be polite about it." The other students watched with a mixture of fascination and discomfort. Some seemed to recognize that they were witnessing something that went beyond normal instruction, but none intervened. The social dynamics of the gym made challenging Derek a risky proposition for anyone who wanted to continue training there. After class, as Rachel gathered her things, Derek approached her with his most intimidating smile. "Find my note?" he asked quietly, positioning himself to block her path to the exit. Rachel looked up at him, her expression calm but unreadable. "I did?" "Good," Derek continued, stepping closer. "I hope you understand what it means. This isn't a game anymore. You don't belong here, and if you keep pushing, things are going to get unpleasant." Several of his friends had positioned themselves nearby, creating a semicircle that made Rachel appear surrounded and isolated. Other gym members gathered their equipment quickly and left, unwilling to witness whatever was about to unfold. "Are you threatening me?" Rachel asked, her voice carrying clearly in the suddenly quiet space. Derek's smile widened. "I'm explaining reality to you. This is a fighter's gym. You're not a fighter. You're a middle-aged woman playing dress-up, and you're going to get hurt if you keep pretending otherwise." Rachel stood slowly, her movements deliberate and controlled. For the first time since joining the gym, she allowed a hint of her military bearing to show through her civilian facade. "I see," she said quietly. "And if I choose to continue training here despite your explanation," Derek's expression hardened, "then you'll learn the difference between a real gym and whatever cardio kickboxing class you think you signed up for. Accidents happen during training. Equipment fails. Sometimes people get hurt worse than they expected. The threat hung in the air like a physical presence. Rachel felt the familiar calm that had served her during the most dangerous moments of her military career, the mental state where training took over and emotion became irrelevant. "Thank you for clarifying your position," she said, shouldering her gym bag. "I'll give it careful consideration." Derek laughed, mistaking her measured response for capitulation. "Smart choice, Grandma. There are plenty of gyms in Atlanta that would be happy to take your money for gentle fitness classes." Rachel nodded politely and walked toward the exit, her pace unhurried despite the hostile atmosphere. But as she reached the door, she turned back to address Derek one final time. "Derek!" she said, her voice carrying a tone that made several people look up sharply. "You should know that I don't respond well to threats, and you might want to ask your uncle about my background before you decide how far you want to push." This. Something in her delivery, the complete absence of fear or bluster, sent a chill through Derek's confidence. For a moment, uncertainty flickered across his features. "What's that supposed to mean?" he called after her. But Rachel was already walking through the door, leaving Derek and his audience to wonder what they had just witnessed. The quiet woman, who had endured weeks of harassment without retaliation, had just drawn a line in the sand, and her calm certainty suggested she had the means to defend it. That night, Rachel sat in her modest apartment, surrounded by the carefully packed memories of her military service. She opened the wooden box she kept in her closet and examined the medals and commendations that represented 8 years of elite training and operational excellence. Her father's dog tags lay on top, their metal surface worn smooth by decades of handling. "Time to show them who I really am, Dad," she whispered, feeling the weight of decision settle around her like familiar armor. The breaking point had been reached. Derek Walsh had given her an ultimatum, and Rachel Carter was about to give him an education in consequences. The morning after Derek's ultimatum, Rachel arrived at Atlanta Combat Center with a different energy. She moved through the facility with quiet purpose, no longer the tentative newcomer seeking to avoid conflict. Her decision had been made, and with it came the focused clarity that had once guided her through hostile territory overseas. Frank Walsh was in his office when Rachel knocked on the doorframe. The gym owner looked up from his paperwork with barely concealed irritation. "What can I do for you, Rachel?" "I need to discuss some ongoing issues with harassment and intimidation," she said, settling into the chair across from his desk without waiting for an invitation. "And I think you should know about my background before this situation escalates further." Frank leaned back in his chair, his expression skeptical. "Look, I've heard the complaints and I've talked to Derek. Boys will be boys in this business. If you can't handle a little competition, I'm a veteran of the United States Army Special Forces," Rachel interrupted, her voice cutting through his dismissive response. 8 years of active duty, including multiple combat deployments. I completed Delta Force selection and served in classified operations across 3 continents. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Frank's expression shifted from irritation to uncertainty as he processed what she had just told him. "I have documentation if you need to verify that information," Rachel continued, placing a manila folder on his desk. "But what you need to understand is that I didn't come here looking for conflict. I came here to learn a new discipline and honor my father's memory. Your nephew has turned that into something else entirely." Frank opened the folder, his eyes scanning the official documents Rachel had brought. Her DD-214 discharge form, commendation, records, and a photograph of her receiving a classified service medal from a general whose name had been redacted for security purposes. "Why didn't you mention this before?" Frank asked, his tone notably more respectful. "Because I left that life behind," Rachel replied. "I work as a physical therapist now. I help people heal. I didn't want my military service to define how people saw me here." Frank studied the documents more carefully, beginning to understand the implications. "Derek doesn't know about this?" "Derek knows I don't respond well to intimidation," Rachel said. "What he doesn't know is that I was trained by the best military has to offer in precisely the kinds of situations he seems determined to create." She leaned forward slightly, her voice taking on the authoritative tone she had once used to brief mission parameters. "Here's what's going to happen, Frank. I'm going to continue training here, and I'm going to be treated with the same respect as any other paying member. The harassment stops today. The threats stop today. And if Derek wants to test himself against someone with actual combat experience, he can do it properly, in front of everyone, where his reputation is on the line, along with mine." Frank set down the papers, recognizing that the dynamic in his gym was about to change dramatically. "What are you proposing?" "Your annual member challenge is coming up next month," Rachel said. "Derek likes to be the star of the show. Let's give him the spotlight he wants, but make it fair. Open competition, regulated environment with everyone watching." Frank considered the proposal, his business instincts warring with family loyalty. "Derek's a professional fighter. He's got 15 wins." "Against other regional amateurs," Rachel interrupted. "I've neutralized trained enemy combatants who were trying to kill me. Your nephew threatens women to feel powerful. There's a difference." The confidence in her voice was absolute, backed by years of experience that Frank was only beginning to comprehend. He had built his business around tough guys and weekend warriors, but Rachel Carter was something else entirely, a genuine professional whose skills had been tested in life-and-death situations. "If I agree to this," Frank said slowly, "and Derek gets hurt, Derek won't get hurt unless he chooses to escalate beyond what the situation requires," Rachel replied. "I have perfect control over my techniques. That's what separates trained professionals from gym bullies. That afternoon, Rachel's name appeared on the member challenge registration list. Word spread quickly through the facility, generating excitement and speculation. Derek's initial reaction was dismissive laughter, but his confidence wavered when Frank pulled him aside for a private conversation about Rachel's military background.
Delta Force, Derek repeated, his voice uncertain for the first time in weeks. Are you sure? I saw the documentation myself, Frank replied. Son, you might want to reconsider how you've been handling this situation. But Derek's pride had been wounded too deeply to allow for retreat.
His online following expected dominance. His gym reputation demanded it, and backing down now would be seen as weakness. I don't care what she used to be, he declared to his friends that evening. This is MMA, not the military, and she's still just a middle-aged woman who thinks she can play with the big boys. Rachel, meanwhile, had begun to prepare in earnest. She contacted Marcus Thompson, a former Army colleague who owned a specialized training facility outside the city. That weekend, she spent 2 days refreshing combat techniques that had been dormant for years, feeling muscle memory return with startling clarity. Like riding a bicycle, Marcus observed, as Rachel flowed through hand-to-hand combat sequences with lethal precision.
How long has it been since you've used this stuff? Too long, Rachel replied, practicing a nerve strike that could incapacitate without permanent damage. But some things you never really forget. The gym's atmosphere shifted as word of the
upcoming challenge spread. Members who had previously ignored or dismissed Rachel began paying attention to her training sessions. Her technique was becoming more visible as she allowed her military precision to show through her civilian restraint. Derek noticed the change and responded by intensifying his own preparation. He trained harder, posted more aggressively on social media, and gathered a larger group of supporters for what he was billing as a defense of the gym's integrity against pretenders and posers. But Rachel was no longer the quiet newcomer he had been bullying for weeks. She was a weapon that had been sharpened by 8 years of elite military training, and Derek Walsh was about to discover the difference between someone who talked about being dangerous and someone who actually was. The member challenge was 3 weeks away, and Rachel Carter had stopped playing defense. The night before the member challenge, Atlanta Combat Center buzzed with an energy unlike anything Frank Walsh had seen in his 15 years of gym ownership. Word had spread beyond the regular membership, drawing curious spectators from the local fighting community, former military personnel who had heard rumors about Rachel's background, and even a few reporters intrigued by the story of a mysterious veteran taking on a rising MMA star. Rachel arrived early, moving through her warm-up routine with the methodical precision that had become her trademark. She wore the same unremarkable workout clothes she always did, but there was something different about her presence, a focused intensity that made people instinctively give her space. Derek made his entrance 20 minutes later, surrounded by his usual entourage and wearing custom gear emblazoned with his social media handles and sponsor logos. He played to the crowd, signing autographs and posing for photos, but Rachel noticed the forced quality of his confidence. Frank had clearly shared some details about her military service, and Derek was working harder than usual to maintain his public image. The challenge began with standard fitness events, deadlifts, pull-ups, and obstacle courses designed to test overall conditioning. Derek performed well, as expected, setting respectable marks that would be difficult for most participants to match. Rachel completed each event with solid but not spectacular results, earning surprised nods from judges who had clearly expected less. "Not bad for someone her age," one spectator commented, unaware that Rachel was operating at perhaps 60% of her actual capability. The middle segment focused on technical skills, grappling escapes, striking combinations, and defensive maneuvers. Here, Rachel's military background began to show more clearly. Her movements were economical and precise, wasting no energy on flashy techniques that might impress spectators but served no tactical purpose. Derek's group noticed her improving performance, their expressions hardening as they conferred in whispered conversations between events. During the obstacle course portion, Rachel felt a deliberate push from behind as she navigated a narrow balance beam. She stumbled forward, nearly falling, and turned to see one of Derek's friends backing away with an expression of exaggerated innocence. "Watch your step," he said with a smirk. Rachel regained her balance and continued, her ankle twinging slightly from the awkward recovery. She finished the course with a respectable time despite the interference, but the incident had been noticed by several spectators who murmured disapprovingly. Frank Walsh stepped forward with a microphone as the final event was announced. "For something different this year," he declared with theatrical enthusiasm, "we've added a combat simulation component. Competitors will demonstrate defensive techniques against an aggressor in a controlled environment. Let's see who can apply what they've learned under pressure." The announcement caused a stir among participants, many of whom had practiced techniques but never applied them in such a public setting. Derek, standing at the front of the crowd, laughed loudly. "This should separate the real fighters from the hobbyists," he boasted to those around him, his gaze finding Rachel in the crowd. "Let's see if Grandma can even remember the basic moves under pressure." As competitors prepared for the final challenge, Rachel removed her windbreaker for the first time that day, revealing a faded Army Special Forces training shirt underneath. The garment was clearly years old and well worn, but it drew immediate attention from those who recognized its significance. A hush fell over the nearest spectators as recognition slowly spread through the crowd. One of the judges, a middle-aged man with military bearing, looked up sharply. "Wait," he said, loudly enough for others to hear. "Is that a Delta Force insignia?" The question rippled through the gathering crowd, reaching Derek just as Rachel stepped onto the demonstration mat. His confident expression faltered as he began to understand that he had been systematically underestimating his opponent for weeks. Rachel stood in the center of the mat, her stance relaxed but ready. Everything about her posture had changed. Gone was the tentative newcomer seeking to avoid conflict, replaced by a professional operator prepared to demonstrate why elite military training was in a category of its own. Derek pushed forward, through the crowd, his pride overriding his growing uncertainty. "I'll volunteer to help the lady out," he announced loudly, his voice carrying its familiar edge of condescension. "I'll go easy on you, Grandma." The instructor overseeing the demonstrations hesitated, looking to Frank for guidance. The gym owner nodded slightly, his expression giving nothing away, as he realized he was about to witness something unprecedented in his facility's history. Rachel showed no reaction as Derek took his position opposite her on the mat. She simply waited, centered and alert, while her opponent bounced on the balls of his feet with poorly concealed excitement. The moment of truth had arrived. Derek Walsh was about to learn the difference between fighting for sport and fighting for survival, between someone who trained to look dangerous and someone who had been forged into a weapon by the world's most elite military program. The crowd fell silent, sensing they were about to witness something extraordinary. The instructor explained the demonstration parameters. Derek would simulate a frontal attack, and Rachel would show defensive countermeasures. "Controlled contact," he emphasized, looking meaningfully at Derek. "This is about technique, not power." Derek nodded dismissively, his attention focused on Rachel with predatory anticipation. He had endured weeks of growing whispers about her mysterious background, watching his authority at the gym slowly erode as people began to question his treatment of her. This public demonstration was his chance to reclaim dominance and prove that military training meant nothing in his world. "Ready when you are, Grandma," he said, loud enough for the entire crowd to hear. Rachel stood in what appeared to be a casual stance, her hands relaxed at her sides. But anyone with combat experience would have recognized the position as one of maximum readiness. Weight evenly distributed, muscles loose but prepared for instant activation. The instructor signaled for them to begin. Derek moved forward with more speed and aggression than the demonstration called for, clearly hoping to overwhelm Rachel with his size and strength advantage. What happened next occurred so quickly that many spectators would later disagree about the exact sequence of events. Rachel sidestepped slightly, her left hand deflecting Derek's reaching arm, while her right struck a precise point at the junction, between his neck and shoulder. Simultaneously, her foot swept behind his ankle as she used his forward momentum against him. Derek's 220-pound frame suddenly pitched forward and down, his balance completely compromised by the perfectly executed technique. He hit the mat with a solid thud that seemed to echo across the suddenly silent gym. His body went limp from the precision nerve strike, his brachial plexus temporarily disrupted in a way that caused no permanent damage, but rendered him completely helpless for several crucial seconds. The silence stretched as Derek lay motionless, his usual confidence replaced by shock and confusion. Rachel stood calmly beside him, showing no triumph or malice, simply the professional composure of someone who had executed a technique thousands of times in training and dozens of times in actual combat. The spell broke when Judge Martinez, the military veteran, began to applaud. The sound was picked up by others until it filled the space with genuine admiration for what they had just witnessed. Derek pushed himself up slowly, his face a complex mixture of humiliation and disbelief. His friends stood awkwardly at the edges
of the mat, unsure whether to rush to his aid or maintain distance from his public downfall. "That technique is called a brachial plexus strike," Rachel explained to the crowd, her voice carrying the practiced tone of an instructor.
"It disrupts nerve function temporarily without causing permanent injury. The effectiveness doesn't depend on physical strength, but on precise knowledge of anatomy and leverage. Anyone, regardless of size, can execute it with proper training." The crowd's reactions swelled again as people realized they had just witnessed something extraordinary. Cell phones emerged to capture the moment and search for confirmation of Rachel's identity. Derek struggled to his feet, avoiding eye contact with anyone as he retreated to the edge of the mat. Frank Walsh stepped forward, his promoter's instincts overriding his family loyalty. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice carrying across the facility, "it seems we've been privileged to have an elite military operative among us all this time. Rachel Carter, former United States Army Special Forces." The crowd's reaction intensified as the full implications became clear. This wasn't just an upset victory in a gym competition, it was a demonstration of the vast gulf between professional military training and civilian martial arts, between someone who had learned to fight for entertainment and someone who had been trained to neutralize threats efficiently and completely. Derek pushed through the spectators, his usual swagger replaced by hunched shoulders and downcast eyes. His entourage hesitated, torn between following their discredited leader and witnessing the continuing celebration of Rachel's revelation. Rachel found herself surrounded by curious gym members, fielding questions about her military experience and combat techniques. She answered politely but briefly, uncomfortable with the sudden attention after months of deliberate anonymity. "How long were you in Special Forces?" someone asked. 8 years, Rachel replied simply. "How many people did you know?" Rachel's expression hardened slightly. "I served my country with honor," she said firmly. "That's all anyone needs to know about my deployments." The crowd respected her boundaries, but the fascination continued. Local media representatives took notes and photos, already crafting stories about the hidden warrior who had been training quietly among them for months. As the event concluded and people began to disperse, Rachel gathered her things with the same methodical care she had shown throughout her time at the gym. But now other members approached her with genuine respect, asking about training opportunities and sharing their own stories of military service. The demonstration had lasted less than 5 minutes, but it had fundamentally altered the power dynamics at Atlanta Combat Center. Derek Walsh's reign of intimidation was over, ended not by anger or revenge, but by the quiet professionalism of someone who understood the difference between real strength and manufactured dominance. Rachel Carter had never wanted to be the center of attention, but sometimes the most important battles are won by people who never sought the fight in the first place. 3 months after the member challenge, Atlanta Combat Center had transformed into something Frank Walsh never expected when he first opened his gym. The toxic atmosphere of intimidation and exclusion had been replaced by a culture of mutual respect and genuine learning, with Rachel Carter as its unlikely catalyst. Derek's absence from the gym lasted nearly 3 weeks following his public humiliation. When he finally returned, he moved through the space like a shadow of his former self, training alone during off-peak hours and keeping interactions to a minimum. His online following had largely evaporated after videos of his defeat went viral, complete with commentary about military precision versus gym bravado. Rachel noticed the change but made no effort to approach him, respecting his process while focusing on her own evolving role at the facility. Frank had offered her a lifetime membership and a position developing a women's self-defense program, opportunities she accepted with careful consideration of her long-term goals. The program Rachel created focused on practical applications rather than sport fighting, techniques that could help ordinary people protect themselves in real-world situations. Her classes drew women of all ages and backgrounds, many sharing stories of feeling intimidated or unsafe in various environments. "The goal isn't to make you fighters," Rachel would tell her students. "It's to give you confidence and options when you need them most." Her teaching style emphasized mental preparation as much as physical technique. Students learned to assess situations, de-escalate when possible, and respond with appropriate force only when necessary. The military discipline that had once set her apart from civilian life now served to bridge different worlds of experience. It was Derek who eventually broke the silence between them, appearing at the door of the studio where Rachel was setting up for an evening session. "Can I have a minute?" he asked, his voice lacking its characteristic swagger. Rachel nodded, continuing to arrange equipment as he stepped inside. "I've been doing some thinking," Derek began awkwardly, "about how I behaved toward you and others. My uncle made it clear that what I did crossed lines, but that's not why I'm here." He paused, clearly struggling with unfamiliar territory. "I'm here because you had every reason to hurt me badly that day, and you didn't. You could have embarrassed me completely, made me look like a total fool, and instead you were professional."
About it. That means something. Rachel set down the training pads she'd been organizing and gave him her full attention.
"That wasn't my goal," she said simply. Derek nodded, looking at the floor. "I know that now. It made me realize I've been so focused on looking tough that I forgot what real strength actually is. The guys I used to hang out with, they disappeared. The minute I wasn't the top dog anymore made me think about who I've been and what I've been building here." He finally met her eyes, genuine emotion breaking through his carefully maintained facade. "Anyway, I just wanted to say I'm sorry for all of it, and I'd understand if you wanted me to find another gym." Rachel considered him for a moment before responding. "This was your space long before it was mine," she said. "I'm not interested in pushing anyone out. That's not why I came here." She picked up a focus mitt from the equipment pile. "You know, I noticed a vulnerability in your guard during the challenge. If you're interested, I could show you how to fix it." The offer hung between them, a potential bridge across a chasm of their own making. After a moment's hesitation, Derek nodded, a small but genuine smile breaking through his uncertainty. "I'd like that," he said. What began as a tentative professional exchange evolved over the following weeks into a respectful, collaborative relationship. Derek's technical skills improved under Rachel's guidance, while her teaching approach benefited from his years of competitive experience. More importantly, the dynamic between them transformed the gym's culture as a whole. Derek's former entourage drifted away, replaced by serious practitioners drawn to the more focused training environment. New members, particularly women who might have been intimidated in the past, joined in growing numbers. The facility's reputation shifted from a place where machismo dominated to one known for technical excellence and inclusive training. For Rachel, the experience brought unexpected healing. She began wearing her father's dog tags openly, no longer hiding that part of her history. She spoke more freely about her military experience when asked, though never boastfully. Elements of her special forces training became integrated into her teaching, not as war stories, but as practical wisdom about focus, discipline, and precise execution. 6 months after the challenge, Atlanta Combat Center hosted an exhibition featuring Rachel's comprehensive self-defense program. The event drew attention from local law enforcement, women's groups, and several publications interested in practical, civilian protection techniques. Rachel led the demonstration with quiet confidence, her expertise evident in every movement as she guided a diverse group of students through realistic scenarios. Her class included former critics and newcomers alike, all following her instructions with focused attention. To the surprise of many, Derek assisted with the demonstrations, his previous arrogance replaced by studied concentration on proper technique and respectful interaction. The transformation was so complete that several attendees asked if they were watching the same person who had been featured in earlier viral videos. As the exhibition concluded to enthusiastic applause, a young woman approached Rachel with visible nervousness. "Is it true you were in Delta Force?" she asked, eyes wide with admiration. "My brother was in the military, and he told me about your demonstration." Rachel smiled, her hand unconsciously moving to touch her father's dog tags, which she now wore openly. "I served," she acknowledged simply, "but that's not the most important part of who I am." The young woman persisted, curious about Rachel's journey and apparent transformation. "How did you go from special forces to this? It's such an incredible story." Rachel looked around at the community that had formed around her, at the space that had transformed from a source of pain to a place of growth. She watched Derek demonstrate a technique to a group of new members, his instruction patient and precise. "Some battles are won not with strength," she said thoughtfully, "but with precision and dignity. That lesson applies everywhere, not just in combat." She paused, considering her words carefully. Sometimes the strongest statement isn't dominating someone else. It's refusing to let them dictate who you are or what you're capable of becoming. Frank Walsh approached, clapping a hand on Rachel's shoulder with newfound respect. "We've got interest from 3 more gyms wanting to implement your program," he said, excitement evident in his voice. "Could be the start of something big," Rachel nodded, appreciating his enthusiasm without fully sharing it. Her goals remained modest, creating spaces where skills were valued over intimidation, where precision and respect took precedence over posturing and exclusion. The expansion of her influence was a welcome side effect, not her primary motivation. Later that evening, after the crowd had dispersed and the gym had quieted, Rachel found herself alone in the training area. She moved through a series of movements that blended her military training with her newer teaching approach, the space feeling different now, no longer hostile territory to be navigated cautiously, but a place where she belonged on her own terms. She had not sought vindication or revenge, had not set out to change the gym's culture or Derek's attitude. She had simply refused to be defined by others' limitations or expectations. The rest had followed naturally, like the perfect execution of a technique practiced thousands of times until it became instinct. Outside the windows, Atlanta's lights glimmered in the early evening darkness, a constellation of human activity and ambition. Rachel thought about all the people in that urban landscape, carrying hidden chapters of their own stories, veterans working ordinary jobs, quiet professionals with extraordinary pasts, simple people with complex capabilities. Her story was just one among millions, notable perhaps only in its momentary visibility. Tomorrow, someone else's hidden strength would be revealed, someone else's patience would be rewarded, someone else's precision would find its mark. The quietest people, Rachel reflected, often carry the most powerful stories. In America, we sometimes forget that everyone has hidden chapters we can't see. The woman bagging groceries might be a former intelligence operative. The quiet man on the bus could have saved lives in combat. The unassuming physical therapist might have served in the nation's most elite military units. Rachel Carter had learned that true strength doesn't announce itself with threats or intimidation. It simply exists, ready to emerge when circumstances demand it, then returns to quiet service once the moment has passed. She gathered her things and headed for the exit, already looking forward to tomorrow's classes and the opportunity to help. Others discover their own hidden reserves of strength and dignity. The warrior had found peace, not through conquest, but through the patient work of building something better than what she had found. Sometimes the greatest victories are won not on battlefields, but in the quiet spaces where people choose respect over fear, growth over stagnation, and community over dominance. Atlanta Combat Center had become one of those spaces, and Rachel Carter had helped show them the way. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.